Okay, so today we're going to take care of SOL 3 and we're going to talk about Egypt. Alright, so we've already studied about Mesopotamia. Now we're going to take a look at Egypt, and for Egypt the same thing is going to be true as it was for Mesopotamia, and that you've got social patterns where you have hereditary rulers. For Egypt it's pharaohs. You have a rigid class system with very little social mobility, and slavery is accepted and widely practiced, not based on race. It would be someone who had been a prisoner of war or someone who owed debt. We're also going to see that it becomes an empire and that it is a theocracy, and that it is based on the government and the religion combined. The pharaohs would be the name of the leaders. And then we do see the use of metals, better results as a result of better tools, irrigation, plows, etc. Alright, so Egypt is going to be along the Nile River. And here are the social patterns that you can expect in Egypt, with Pharaoh being the very top of the pyramid, slaves being the very bottom, and we definitely did have slavery in Egypt. Alright, again, slaves would be either peasants, people who owe debt, or prisoners of war. So these were most likely not built using slave labor. That's a big misconception. Hebrews built the pyramids is a big misconception. Probably the people who built these were actually paid to do that. So anyway, these are the Egyptian pyramids, very, very well known for their pyramids. Egypt was a theocracy where the pharaoh was both the religious and political leader of Egypt. And as I said before, we definitely see an agricultural surplus leading to population growth and trade, specialization of labor, and we definitely do see slavery. Alright, so geography. We know that Egypt is located along the Nile River, which is the longest river in the world. It's over 4,000 miles and it flows north. You have a huge delta at the mouth of the Nile River that has a lot of alluvial soil that it's picked up along the river banks, and so it's very, very rich soil at the delta at its mouth where it empties, and that is soil that makes it easier to do farming. So remember, to the north actually is Lower Egypt, Lower River. Upper River, up Nile is located to the south. So we know that they had flooding. The river would flood very predictably, and as a result of that, as we said before, we know that the gods were considered more kind, gentler gods. So again, rich soil along the river. This is a satellite picture, current picture of this region, and of course, since this is a satellite night picture, anywhere where you see light shows you where population lives, and you can clearly see that still to this day most people who live in this area in North Africa live along the Nile River and in the delta, and the main reason is because everything you see that's black here in North Africa, everything else is the Sahara Desert. It shows you the Nile Delta, how it fans out. And here's an aerial view that shows you the Nile Delta, and you can see how dry it is. Look how brown the land is. That shows that it's very dry desert land like the Sahara Desert. Here you can see the Nile River flowing through Egypt today. This is a current picture, and you can see how dry it is on the banks of the Nile River. So again, we've got a lot of natural barriers for Egypt. Deserts to the east and west. You have the huge Sahara Desert, have the Mediterranean Sea to the north. You have the Red Sea to the east, and then along the Nile you have something known as cataracts, which is what we call waterfalls along the Nile River. And the last time I checked, if you go over a cataract with a boat, that's not a good thing. So you can see they literally had natural geographic barriers on all sides, which kind of protects Egypt. So we had that protection. They didn't have a whole lot of invasions, and then on top of that, the Nile River would flood predictably. So that is another reason why they considered, their gods to be kinder, gentler gods. I do want to point out Nubia down here, Kush, that we've talked about. Remember that that is actually in Upper Egypt, the Upper Nile area, upriver on the Nile. And these are some of the cataracts. I thought you might want to see what those look like. You can obviously see boats cannot go over that. So religion, during most of the history, they practiced polytheism. Matter of fact, they practiced polytheism the entire history except for one very brief time. And of course, we know polytheism is the belief in numerous gods and goddesses. An example of one of the gods and goddesses is Ra, which is the sun god, had a human body with the head of a falcon. Osiris, which is the river god, and then Isis, which is the land god. So these are the three major gods, goddesses that we will need to know for Egypt. So here you can see Osiris up here, top left, Isis down here, and then Ra or Re, which is the sun god. Okay, so here are some other Egyptian gods and goddesses. We will not be talking about these, but I thought you might want to see them. So their religion, again, they viewed their gods as gentler gods as a result of the predictability of flooding of the Nile River. They very briefly practiced monotheism, belief in one god, and that was during the time of Pharaoh Amenhotep IV. He literally changed his name to Akhenaten, which means pleasing to Aten, and it was during this time that the sun god became known as Aten, and they worshipped the sun god Aten. So just during that lifetime of that one pharaoh were they monotheistic. So written language, they had hieroglyphs. Those hieroglyphics are pretty famous. We know that they combined alphabetic, syllabic, and pictographs. And we can tell what these hieroglyphics say because of the Rosetta Stone, which was found. And the Rosetta Stone actually has several different languages, and since we know one of the languages, we can tell what the hieroglyphics are. So hieroglyphics literally means priest carvings. So here are some examples of the hieroglyphics. Sacred writings. Here are actual hieroglyphics. And here's the Rosetta Stone. Again, the same passage is written in Greek, hieroglyphics, and Demotic. And it is the Greek that we definitely know, and so being able to interpret the Greek meant we could interpret the hieroglyphics and tell what hieroglyphics meant. And this was found in 1799, but it was created way back in 196 BCE. If you ever get to London, this is actually found in the British Museum in London. Here it is up close. So papyrus is how they actually recorded things, and which is made out of the fibers from the papyrus plant. And this is a picture of the papyrus plant. And they would take that and go through a process of flattening that out, and then that's the material that they would use in order to record their history. So here you can see different pictures of the papyrus plant. It's a reed that lives along the Nile River. And here's the process. They start out by slicing it, top left, and then layering those thin slices. And then they would try to take a hammer and hammer these different slices so that it would try to bond the fibers together. And here's an example of where they're literally weaving this together to make papyrus. And you can create beautiful pictures on papyrus. Now, their calendar was really just created out of necessity for farming. They did that to be able to tell when it was time to plant their crops based on when the Nile River would flood. Here are your pyramids at Giza and the Sphinx that is guarding those pyramids. So they're also known for creating mummies. They're actually experts at the mummification process, and they did fill the tombs full of gold. And this is an actual mummy that you see right here. This is Ramses. And another picture of that mummy. And it's hard to believe that that's over 3,000 years old. Okay, this is the sarcophagus for King Tut. And what makes King Tut so amazing is that when his tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings, he was not in one of the pyramids. But when his was discovered, it had been untouched by any looters. So everything that we find in this tomb is in pristine shape. And this is real gold. It's just absolutely beautiful. These are some things found in his tomb. Look at all the items. They believed that when the pharaoh died that he would come back in the afterlife and that he needed all of these things. And they would also put food and water. And here are two Egyptologists actually taking one of the mummies and doing a CAT scan on it so that they can see exactly what they did during the mummification process. Here we see them opening King Tut's tomb. And that is actually King Tut that you're looking at. That is his mummy. Closer picture of that. Those are his feet and his actual toes. And this is what we think on the left that he looked like based on what we have of his mummy, his remains here to the right. These pictures come out of National Geographic. And we do think that he had some physical abnormalities that go all the way back to birth as a result of inbreeding. It was very, very common for brothers and sisters to marry because they felt like they needed to keep the royal blood pure, and they thought that was the way to do that.